All right, let's jump right into one of English literature's most fascinating and, honestly, most overlooked periods, the Age of Sensibility. You've got to think of it as the crucial bridge that gets us from the super logical, cool-headed age of reason to the passionate, heart-on-its-sleeve explosion of Romanticism. So let's break down what that actually looked like.
And really, this is the big question for the whole era. I mean, for decades, literature was all about logic, social order, and razor-sharp satire. But something was bubbling up just beneath the surface, a new current that started to value the heart way more than the head.
A really great way to picture this whole shift is to think of a pendulum. The Augustan Age, with guys like Pope and Swift, had swung that pendulum way, way over to the side of logic and reason. Well, this new age we're talking about, this is the pendulum starting its slow, powerful swing right back to the other side, towards individual feelings and emotion.
And you can really see just how dramatic this shift was. On one side, you've got the busy, witty social world of Augustan reason. And on the other, the quiet, solitary, natural world of personal feeling. Writers weren't just observing society anymore, they were starting to look inward. Reason was suddenly being challenged by things like sympathy and a brand new love for the natural world.
Of course, none of this happened in a vacuum. The world itself was in absolute turmoil. You've got the Industrial Revolution kicking off, creating all these new problems in cities, and then, bam, the American and French revolutions just shatter everyone's old ideas about politics and society. All of this upheaval created this massive hunger for a new kind of literature, one that could actually dig into personal feelings and morality in a way that social satire just couldn't.
Okay, so with this brand new focus on emotion, people needed a new language, a new vocabulary to even talk about it. This wasn't just about feeling happy or sad anymore. It was a whole different way of experiencing the world around you. And the absolute key term you have to know is sensibility. Now, this is so important. Today, if we say someone's too sensitive, it's usually not a compliment, right? But back in the 18th century, having sensibility was the mark of a superior person. It meant you had this finely tuned moral compass, that you could cry for someone else's suffering, that you could have a deep emotional response to art and nature. It was a virtue.
And wow, this quote from the philosopher David Hume just perfectly captures the intellectual earthquake that was happening. He is completely flipping the Augustan world on its head. The idea that reason should serve our emotions, not the other way around, that was so radical. It really became the philosophical backbone for this entire literary movement.
So if sensibility is the ability to feel deeply, what exactly were people feeling? Well, one of the most powerful new ideas was the Sublime, and it was brilliantly defined by Edmund Burke back in 1757. The Sublime is an experience that is so huge, so powerful, that it actually short-circuits your brain's ability to reason, and it just leaves you in the state of awe, mixed with a healthy dose of terror. These two images show Burke's idea perfectly. On the left, you've got the beautiful. Think of a pretty flower or a gentle stream. It's pleasing, it's small, it's smooth, it makes you feel calm. But on the right, you've got the sublime, a massive mountain, a raging storm. It's rugged, it's huge, and frankly, it's terrifying. It creates this kind of thrilling tension, a sort of pleasurable fear, because you're witnessing this immense power from a safe distance. This one idea completely changed art and poetry forever. So with all this talk about intense emotions, melancholy, and the terrifyingly sublime, it's probably no surprise that literature started to get a little, well, gloomy. A whole new style of poetry basically sprang up from this obsession with doom and gloom. And that brings us to the graveyard school. Yeah, these poets did pretty much exactly what it sounds like. They would hang out in churchyards at night, thinking about death, mortality, and what comes next. Thomas Parnell kind of got the ball rolling, but it was Edward Young who really mastered it with his epic poem Night Thoughts. Robert Blair's The Grave was way more dark and intense, but the undisputed champion of the school was Thomas Gray.
And this quote? This is the heart of Gray's masterpiece. His elegy isn't just about being sad about death. It's this incredibly profound thought experiment about wasted potential. He's looking at the graves of all these poor anonymous villagers and wondering, who is buried here? Could there have been a great poet, a great leader, someone who just never got the chance to shine? The key thing here is that the sadness has a real social conscience to it.
Now, this obsession with gloom and terror wasn't just in poetry. Oh no. In 1764, a guy named Horace Walpole published The Castle of Otranto, and in doing so, he pretty much single-handedly invented the Gothic novel. All the things we love about Gothic stories were there right from the start. The creepy, haunted castle, the damsel in distress, ghosts and supernatural stuff, and this deep sense of psychological terror that would inspire writers for centuries.
But here's the thing. This period wasn't some clean break from the past. A lot of the most important writers were what we'd call transitional figures. They still had one foot in the old, classical world, but they were filling those old forms with all this new, emotional content.
And here are 3 pioneers you've got to know. First up, James Thomson. He basically taught a whole generation how to write about nature with a sense of awe, breaking free from those rigid Augustan couplets to use this beautiful flowing blank verse. Then there's Lawrence Sterne, whose novel A Sentimental Journey actually made the word sentimental popular. And in the Gothic world, Anne Radcliffe became the master of terror, that feeling of suspense and dread, which she argued was much more powerful than just graphic horror.
But not everybody was on board with all the tears and terror. Towering over the whole second half of the century was the one and only Samuel Johnson. As a poet, a critic, and the guy who created the first great dictionary of the English language, Johnson was the ultimate champion of reason, morality, and classical order. He was like the Augustan conscience of the period, this huge rock of stability against the rising tide of sensibility.
So we've watched that pendulum swing all the way from reason over to feeling. Now let's put it all together and see exactly how the Age of Sensibility built that essential bridge that the Romantics would soon march right across.
You can see the evolution so clearly here. That sympathy for the poor we saw in Gray's Elegy, the Romantics take that and turn it into a full-blown celebration of the common man. That fascination with the terrifying sublime, it becomes Wordsworth's almost spiritual worship of nature's power. And that new interest in old folk songs and ballads, it leads directly to the single most important book of poetry for the next 100 years.
And that book, of course, was Lyrical Ballads. When William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge published it in 1798, it was like a manifesto for a new kind of poetry. Its publication is that clear line in the sand that scholars point to as the end of the Age of Sensibility and the official, explosive start of the Romantic movement.
Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. I mean, sure, the Age of Sensibility might seem a little quiet, a little melancholy compared to the literary superstars who came next. But this period is what taught literature how to feel again. It's what explored our inner worlds, found something divine in nature, and gave a voice to the forgotten. So you just have to ask, without the quiet tears of this age, could the Romantics have ever learned to roar?